The stale conference room air hung heavy, thick with the scent of overly strong coffee and polished desperation. Brandon, our new VP of sales, leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled on the glossy table. He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet. "Scarlett," he began, his voice smooth but devoid of warmth. "Your recent performance metrics? Well, they show a lack of hunger. We need aggressive hunters in this market, people who can meet higher targets in this new direction the company is taking." He slid a stack of papers across the table. "Termination. Effective immediately." My mind went oddly blank for a second, then flooded with 1,000 small details. The 9 years I'd poured into Midwest Sterling Group, the countless nights working late, the missed school plays, the client crises handled at 2 a.m. My portfolio, the one that accounted for a solid 42% of the company's revenue last year, sitting there on a spreadsheet, reduced to a single phrase: lack of hunger. I looked at the papers, then back at Brandon. He wasn't even really looking at me, his eyes already darting to the next item on his mental agenda. He'd been here 6 months, brought in to synergize and disrupt, words he threw around like confetti. He'd slashed commissions for established accounts, demanding we focus only on bringing in shiny new logos, even if they were small potatoes. He'd moved my office from a comfortable spot near the windows to a cramped corner during a pointless space optimization project. My name started disappearing from important meeting invites. He even assigned Leo, a kid fresh out of business school who worked for Brandon at his last doomed startup, to shadow me on calls, ostensibly to learn the ropes, but it felt more like an auditor watching for perceived inefficiencies. Just last week, on a call with Robert Sterling over at Northern Industries, a client I brought in 7 years ago and grew into a multi-million-dollar account, Leo interrupted to ask if Mr. Sterling had considered optimizing his widget production flow based on Q3 market velocity indices. Robert, a man who built his company with his hands, just blinked slowly, then looked at me with a raised eyebrow that said, "Who is this kid?" I smoothly steered the conversation back to Robert's actual needs, but the seed of unease was planted. "Scarlett," Brandon prompted, a hint of impatience in his tone. He probably expected tears, or maybe an argument. But in that moment, looking at his perfectly coiffed hair and dismissive eyes, a strange calm washed over me. This wasn't about performance. It was something else. Something calculated. The cold, hard papers on the table weren't a judgment on my work. They were a tool. "Okay," I said, my voice steady. I picked up the papers. "I understand. Thank you for the opportunity, Brandon." He seemed momentarily taken aback by the lack of drama. Good. HR will be in touch regarding logistics." He waved a hand dismissively, already reaching for his phone. I walked out of the conference room, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my face expressionless. The office hummed around me, phones ringing, keyboards clicking. It felt surreal, like watching a movie from a distance. My desk felt both familiar and foreign as I began clearing it. 9 years. 9 years of early mornings, late nights, plane travel, client dinners, putting out fires, celebrating wins. It all fit into a single cardboard box. Family photos, a slightly chipped mug my son had painted in kindergarten, a small leather-bound notebook with handwritten notes from client meetings, and tucked deep inside, a separate folder. Not company property, just a personal system I'd kept for years. Duplicate business cards, private cell numbers, notes on clients' kids' names, their birthdays, their favorite sports teams, the little things that built real relationships. Habit, nothing more. Or so I told myself. Brenda from accounting, a sweet woman who always had a smile, stopped by, her face etched with confusion. "Oh, Scarlett. Are you moving offices?" I gave her a small, tight smile. "Something like that, Brenda. Just clearing out." I didn't want to explain. Didn't want pity, didn't want questions. The elevator ride down felt like the longest journey of my life. I stood next to Thomas, the CEO. He was glued to his phone, brow furrowed, probably looking at quarterly projections or news about the latest market fluctuations. He nodded vaguely in my direction, not really seeing me. He had no idea what Brandon had just done, what vital piece of the company he'd just discarded. Not yet, anyway. But he would. Soon enough. Stepping out onto the busy St. Louis street, The humid air hit my face. No anger, not yet. Just that weird sense of detached clarity, like watching your own house burn down from across the street. A hollow feeling in my gut. 9 years. Gone. I got in my car and drove home in silence. No radio, no calls. Just the low thrum of the engine and the chaotic swirl of thoughts in my head. What just happened? What does this mean? As I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed on the dashboard. David at Reliance Manufacturing. A text. Hey Scarlett, dinner reservations for Thursday confirmed. Looking forward to discussing renewal. He had no idea. None of them did. I walked into the house. It was quiet. My partner, Daniel, was out of town visiting his sister. Probably for the best. I needed the silence. I set the cardboard box on the kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of bourbon. I looked out the window at the familiar backyard. 9 years. Years of building trust, one client at a time, one late-night call at a time. Years of proving my word was good. Brandon didn't just fire an employee today. He'd cut the lifeline connecting a significant chunk of Midwest Sterling's revenue directly to the company. And he was too clueless, too focused on his jargon and metrics, to even know it. I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out my personal phone. Scrolled through the contacts. Hundreds of names. David. Emily. Robert. People who signed contracts because they trusted me. Not because of a fancy logo or a corporate marketing campaign. My company phone, now sitting dead in the box, held the official company records. But these contacts, the personal cell numbers, the notes on family, the easy rapport, that was all here. Information accumulated by being someone people wanted to work with, someone they relied on. I sipped the bourbon. It burned going down. 9 years. 60-hour weeks. Missed dinners. Rushed goodnights. Building something I thought was ours, only to find out it was never really mine to begin with. I opened my laptop and found the scanned copy of my employment contract. The non-compete clause. Standard stuff. 1 year within a certain geographical area. But Arthur, my lawyer friend, had mentioned years ago how tricky those were to enforce, especially if you were fired, not if you left voluntarily. Termination changed the game. There was no legal barrier to me working for a competitor, and more importantly, no legal barrier preventing my clients from choosing to follow me. My phone buzzed again. David. Everything okay? Didn't hear back. I stared at the message. Reliance Manufacturing alone represented over $2 million in annual business for Midwest Sterling. David had been with me for years. And he wasn't alone. Westwood Holdings, Northern Industries, others, together, they accounted for millions more. All with renewals coming up in the next few months. All dealt exclusively through me. I finished my drink. A strange calm settled over me. Not panic about the mortgage or health insurance. Just a cold, clear understanding of what had happened. And what was about to happen next. I wouldn't call anyone tonight. No angry emails. No venting. I'd sleep on it. Wake up clear-headed. And then I would make exactly 3 phone calls. Not to complain. Not to recruit. Just to inform my closest clients that I was no longer with Midwest Sterling, effective immediately. The rest, I knew, would happen on its own. I took the painted mug and the family photos out of the box and placed them on the counter. My kids' faces smiled up at me. Their graduation. Our rush trip to the Grand Canyon that I almost canceled for a client emergency. I'd missed too much already. Tomorrow, I would start making different choices. I went upstairs to an empty house and got into bed. For the first time in years, I didn't set an alarm. No early flights, no reports to review before dawn. Just the quiet certainty that Brandon Ellsworth had made a catastrophic mistake, and I didn't need to do anything but step aside and let the dominoes fall. The next morning, I woke up refreshed. The quiet house felt peaceful, not empty. I made coffee and then deliberately sat down with my personal phone. I took a deep breath and made the first call. David? Hi, it's Scarlett. Scarlett. Hey. Didn't hear back last night. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to call you directly and let you know that I'm no longer with Midwest Sterling Group. As of yesterday. A beat of silence stretched, crackling down the phone line. What? What happened? You were just there. It was a change in direction for the company, I kept my voice neutral. Brandon decided they needed a different profile for the sales team. Brandon? That VP guy? The one with the kid who kept asking about widgets. David sounded incredulous. So, who's handling our account now? Brandon will likely reach out, I said. Or maybe Leo, the young man who sat in on our call with Robert last week. I paused, letting that sink in. That's all I can tell you right now. The rest is your decision, of course. Leo? That he doesn't know our business, Scarlett. Not like you do. This is, wow. Similar conversations followed with Emily at Westwood Holdings and Robert at Northern Industries. Emily was immediately livid. Scarlett, that's unbelievable. After everything you built there, who do they think they are? Robert was more pragmatic but equally concerned. Leo? Oh, the kid. He seemed nice enough but didn't grasp the nuances of our contract. What's going on over there? To each of them, I offered only the facts of my departure, a brief neutral mention of who might contact them, and stated that their next steps were entirely their choice. No soliciting, no recruitment pitch. Just information, delivered with the same reliability they'd come to expect from me. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Other clients, industry contacts, former colleagues. The news traveled fast through the grapevine. The industry was smaller than most people realized, and my network was deep. Around lunchtime, Thomas, the CEO, called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was strained, urgent. Scarlett, this is Thomas. We need to talk about your transition. Several key clients are expressing concerns. Please call me back immediately. I didn't call him back. Instead, I called Arthur, my lawyer friend. He agreed to meet me that afternoon. I drove downtown, the city skyline looking different now. Sharper. Arthur, a shrewd man with kind eyes, reviewed my termination papers over coffee. Underperforming despite those numbers? He raised an eyebrow. That's weak sauce, Scarlett. As we discussed, termination like this significantly complicates their ability to enforce a non-compete, especially regarding clients you personally brought in and managed for years. They can't stop you from working in your field, and they can't legally stop your clients from choosing to follow you. What should I expect from them? I asked. Arthur leaned forward. Panic, and attempts to contain it. They will absolutely contact your clients. They might try to scare them, perhaps imply legal action if they switch, or even try to smear your reputation. The best strategy here is often silence and letting them flail. Document everything. Any communication, any threats. We'll be ready if they push too hard. Just as Arthur predicted, the messages from Midwest Sterling started escalating after my 3 calls. First, a formal email from their legal department, reiterating confidentiality obligations and non-solicitation clauses. Then a text from Brandon. Scarlett, let's discuss your exit package. There might be room for a consulting role to smooth things over. I didn't reply. Around 5:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from David at Reliance Manufacturing. Just got off the phone with Brandon and that kid, Leo. They were tripping over themselves. Brandon kept talking about synergy platforms and value adds. That made no sense. Offered a 10% discount on renewal. Said Leo would be our main point of contact. What did you tell them? I typed back. Said I'd think about it. Which I did for about 10 seconds. Another text popped up. Scarlett, I've sent notice terminating our contract, effective end of month. Citing change in relationship management. My breath hitched. Emily at Westwood and Robert at Northern did the same, David added. We were just texting each other. Look, Scarlett, where are you landing? Because wherever it is, that's where our business is going. That night, 3 more companies from my portfolio sent termination notices to Midwest Sterling. By morning, the total was 8, representing over $3.5 million in contracts. Hannah, my former assistant, texted me around 8 a.m. Complete chaos here. Brandon is blaming you for client poaching. Thomas is demanding to know why nobody saw this coming. Layoffs started in accounting and admin. Her texts painted a vivid, almost unbelievable picture of panic and finger-pointing. Then my phone rang. An unknown number with a St. Louis area code. I hesitated, then answered. Scarlett, this is Michael Hayes, CEO of Apex Solutions. Apex was a smaller, but highly respected competitor in the market, known for its client-focused approach and strong ethical standing. I hear you might be available, and several mutual friends speak very highly of you. Are you taking calls? I'm listening, Michael, I said, a tremor of excitement going through me. He didn't waste time. Senior Vice President position. Leading your own team, full autonomy over client relationships, a significant six-figure compensation package, and a clear path to equity partnership within 2 years based on performance. His voice was calm, confident, a stark contrast to Brandon's frantic energy. How soon would you want to start? How does tomorrow sound? I asked, a smile spreading across my face. I accepted the offer on the spot. Not out of desperation, but because it was exactly what I needed. Respect for my value, autonomy to work the way I knew was effective, and a chance to build something for myself. Later that afternoon, Brandon texted again. The board is panicking. They've approved a new offer, full salary for 6 months, plus stock options. Just help us transition your accounts. Please. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. They'd had 9 years to value what I built. Now they were trying to put a price on it after they'd already thrown it away. Too little. Far too late. My first week at Apex Solutions was a whirlwind, but a good one. My new office wasn't massive, but it had a great view of the arch, and the atmosphere was positive and collaborative. Michael and the team were welcoming and clearly valued the expertise I brought. It felt like coming up for air. About 2 weeks in, I got a call on my personal phone. It was Hannah. She sounded hesitant. Scarlett? It's Hannah. I used a friend's phone to call. I need to tell you something important. It wasn't just about Brandon wanting his own people. There was more. I sat back in my chair, the view of the city a blur. Go on, Hannah. Her voice was low, urgent. They were planning to sell the company. To Valor Equity. They made an offer a couple of months ago, but it was conditional. Valor wanted to bring in their people for the major clients, integrate the accounts into their existing portfolio companies. They saw client relationships as assets to be transferred, not people to be nurtured. The pieces clicked into place with brutal clarity. Brandon hadn't been hired just to boost sales numbers or change the culture. He was brought in to systematically decouple key client relationships from the individuals who held them, making them easier to absorb during an acquisition. My termination wasn't about my performance. It was about my relationships being too strong, too personal, too tied to me and not the company logo. I was an impediment to the sale, a middleman who needed to be removed, so my clients could be repackaged as corporate assets. The betrayal settled deep in my stomach, cold and heavy. 9 years. All the missed family moments, the constant effort, the belief that I was building something lasting within that company. It had all been reduced to a hurdle in a corporate transaction. I wasn't fired. I was sacrificed. How do you know all this, Hannah? I asked, my voice tight. I'm still assigned to the executive suite, sorting through files during the layoffs, she explained. I see the documents. I hear the panicked conversations now that Valor has pulled their offer. They pulled the offer? My mind raced. Yes. Valor told them yesterday they wouldn't buy without that core client base. The one you built. It collapsed the whole deal. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The anger at Brandon felt almost secondary now. This was bigger, colder, more calculated. They were willing to dismantle years of trust and loyalty for a payday. I opened my laptop. More emails from former clients who had heard I was at Apex and were reaching out. The industry grapevine was buzzing. Midwest Sterling's stock had dropped significantly since my departure. Then a text from Thomas. Scarlett, can we meet? Just you and me. No lawyers. I didn't reply immediately. The pain of the betrayal was still too raw. I had to be sure. I called David at Reliance Manufacturing. David, I need to ask you something. Before I left, did anyone from Midwest Sterling or someone presented as a strategic advisor or industry consultant try to introduce themselves to you or meet with you in the last few months? A pause. How did you know? Yeah, about 3 months ago. Brandon brought in some guy, Thomas the first think his name was? Said he was from a partner firm looking at our industry, Asked a lot of questions about our future needs, our relationship with Midwest Sterling. Confirmation. They had been parading representatives from Valor Equity in front of my clients, probing the relationships, laying the groundwork for the transfer, all while I was still working there, still believing I was building something that mattered. More calls to Emily, Robert, and others revealed the same pattern. Covert meetings, questions designed to understand their needs and loyalty to me, groundwork laid to show Valor they could easily take over the accounts. At least 6 of my major clients confirmed being approached by Valor representatives under false pretenses. Finally, I texted Thomas back. No meeting necessary, Thomas. I understand the Valor situation completely. His response was swift. It was a business decision, Scarlett. Nothing personal. But it was personal. It was 9 years of personal investment. Of knowing clients' kids' names, their golf handicaps, the challenges in their businesses beyond the contract. It was answering calls on weekends and holidays. It was trust, earned brick by painstaking brick, reduced to an impediment for a corporate transaction. I closed my laptop and looked out at the St. Louis skyline from my Apex office. The view felt clearer here. Apex Solutions had already signed contracts with 11 of my former clients, representing nearly $5 million in annual revenue, and more were finalizing paperwork. They weren't following a logo. They were following trust, following a person who consistently delivered value. Midwest Sterling hadn't just lost a sales executive, they'd lost the very foundation their recent growth was built upon, and they still didn't fully grasp why. 3 weeks after joining Apex, I received an invitation to speak at the Midwest Financial Services Conference. The panel topic, Building Client Loyalty in a Transactional Market. The irony was sharp, almost painful. I accepted. Not for ego, but because I knew exactly who would be in that audience, industry peers, potential clients, and most importantly, the remaining leadership team from Midwest Sterling Group. Thomas never missed this conference. Apex gave me resources Midwest Sterling never had. Dedicated analysts, marketing support, and most importantly, the promise of equity. Every client I brought in wasn't just commission. It was building something I would partially own. I spent a month preparing for the conference, not with flashy slides, but with irrefutable data. Working with the Apex analysts, I compiled performance metrics for every client who had followed me. The results were undeniable. Average service response time reduced by 50%, implementation costs down 25%, client satisfaction scores up significantly. It wasn't just about me. It was about proving the tangible benefits of a relationship-focused approach versus a transactional one. The morning of the conference, I reviewed my notes one last time. The goal wasn't a dramatic reveal or a public shaming. It was about presenting facts and outcomes. Professional, measured, and utterly devastating in its implications for my former employer. As I walked into the grand ballroom, I spotted Thomas immediately, huddled with a couple of men I recognized as Midwest Sterling board members near the coffee station. His face tightened visibly when he saw me. I nodded politely, maintaining my composure, and moved towards the panelist area. The panel began with standard discussions about market trends. When it was my turn, I spoke plainly. In an age where technology automates and digitizes so much, personal accountability and trust have become the rarest commodities, I said. Companies often mistake client relationships for corporate assets. They are not. They are trust agreements built between individuals, requiring constant reinforcement, deep understanding, and consistent value delivery. I presented my data, showing charts of improved performance for clients. I didn't mention Midwest Sterling by name, simply referring to case studies of clients who transitioned to a firm with a different service philosophy. The lesson here, I concluded, looking directly towards the Midwest Sterling contingent, my voice calm but carrying, isn't about retention packages or contractual obligations. It's about understanding that when you treat the relationship managers who hold the deepest client trust as interchangeable parts or as obstacles to a transaction, your clients will show you exactly how wrong that assumption is. Value follows people, not just logos. During the Q&A, a young analyst in the audience, clearly eager to make a name for himself, asked the question everyone was thinking. Ms. Sterling, he began, using my last name formally. Given your recent high-profile move from Midwest Sterling to Apex Solutions and the significant client base that followed you, Isn't this exactly the scenario companies fear when considering how much autonomy to give their relationship managers? The room went utterly silent. You could hear a pin drop. I could feel Thomas's eyes burning into me from across the room. That's a very fair question, I replied, meeting his gaze. But consider the alternative. Midwest Sterling Group lost those clients, not because I took them, but because they failed to understand what those clients actually valued. No one followed me out of personal loyalty alone. They followed because their needs were consistently better met through my approach to service, an approach my former employer decided was no longer aligned with their direction. I paused, letting the weight of those words hang in the air. Every company has the right to change direction. And every client has the right to decide if that new direction serves their interests. The market, in this regard, is brutally efficient. After the panel, 3 more former Midwest Sterling clients approached me. By the end of the conference, Apex Solutions had signed letters of intent with 5 new accounts, representing another significant chunk of annual revenue. That evening, I checked the financial news on my phone. Midwest Sterling Group announced a significant restructuring. Brandon Ellsworth was out, the statement saying he was pursuing other opportunities. The Valor Equity acquisition? Officially dead. Their stock had fallen another 8% that day. I closed my laptop without a trace of satisfaction or triumph. Just the quiet certainty that comes from being proven right in the most definitive way possible by the market itself. The lesson had been delivered. Whether they learned from it was no longer my concern. 6 months into my role at Apex, I stood in our largest conference room, surrounded by my growing team and Apex's leadership. On the screen behind me, a single slide displayed our quarterly results. $9.1 million in new business this quarter, 65% of it from former Midwest Sterling clients. Michael Hayes, the CEO of Apex, raised a glass. To Scarlett, and to the best acquisition we ever made. And we didn't even have to buy a company to get it. Polite laughter rippled through the room. I smiled, but didn't join the laughter. For me, this wasn't just about celebration. It was about validation. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Midwest Sterling Group announces CEO transition. Thomas Stanton steps down amid continued revenue challenges. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Some victories don't need an audience. Later that afternoon, I received an email. From Hannah. Scarlett, it read. I've been let go, along with most of the sales team Brandon hired. They're gutting departments. Any chance Apex is hiring? I forwarded the email to our head of HR with a note. Worth interviewing. Excellent support professional. Caught in the crossfire. As I was leaving the office, my assistant handed me an envelope that had arrived by a courier. Inside, a folded card. A handwritten note from Thomas. Scarlett, you were right. I was wrong. I prioritized transaction over relationship, and it cost the company everything. My blindness, my trust in the wrong people, destroyed what you built and damaged the lives of many good people. There's no excuse. Just regret. If you're ever willing to have coffee, I would appreciate the chance to apologize in person and perhaps learn from my mistakes. Thomas. I folded the note and placed it in my jacket pocket. Maybe someday. Not yet. That evening, driving home with Daniel, I passed the old Midwest Sterling building downtown. Workers were on scaffolding, beginning to remove the large company sign from the facade. The local business journal had reported they were drastically downsizing and moving to a smaller, cheaper office park in the suburbs. I didn't slow down, didn't take a photo, just drove on, eyes forward, towards the life I was building on my own terms. 1 year to the day after Brandon had slid those termination papers across the conference table, I signed the final documents, making me a full partner at Apex Solutions. The firm had grown over 40% since my arrival. My client portfolio alone now represented nearly $22 million in annual revenue. I closed the manila folder containing the partnership agreement and looked out my office window at the St. Louis skyline. The same buildings, the same city. But everything else had changed. Daniel came in with 2 cups of coffee. Signed and official? I nodded. Signed and official. He sat across from me, studying my face. You don't look as excited as I expected. I shook my head, a small smile touching my lips. Just thinking about Midwest Sterling. About what I'm building here. About doing it right this time. That morning, my first official act as partner was approving the hiring of 3 new account managers for my team. Their compensation structure included a significant profit share, mirroring the deal I'd negotiated for myself. No one under my leadership would ever build something this valuable, only to have it taken away from them as a corporate asset. My phone buzzed on the desk. David at Reliance Manufacturing. Heard about the partnership, Scarlett. Congratulations. Knew you'd land on your feet. Thanks, David. Thanks to clients like you. Nah, he corrected immediately. Thanks to you being who you are. We just followed the value. And the trust. After we hung up, I picked up a framed quote Daniel had given me last Christmas. The best revenge is massive success. It had sat on my credenza for a while. I turned it face down. That chapter was closed. Revenge wasn't the point anymore. I pulled out my calendar. I booked lunch with Thomas 2 months out. Not to gloat, not to rehash the past endlessly, but because sometimes the final step in moving forward is simply releasing the weight of what happened before. I shut down my computer, grabbed my keys, and walked out to meet Daniel. We had tickets to our son's band performance tonight. Something I would have undoubtedly missed in my previous life for a client emergency or a late-night report. Some losses clear the way for better victories. Some fires burn away what needs to go. I'd never been more certain of that than I was today.